Hey everybody, Gurmos here, and I got some more Warthunder tank action. In this video I thought I'd take a small look at a few tanks that were introduced in the closed beta recently. The T-34-85, the Panzer IV Ausführung H, the Tiger, the Panzer III Ausführung M, and also take a look at some changes and what is new in general. One thing I want to mention really quick though. I wanted to have an aircraft video out by now. Sadly, I caught the flu last week, so I was out of action for a while and I could not get any footage. So the next aircraft video will be a bit delayed. Now, back to the closed beta. The beta gets updated basically every day with smaller and bigger updates, physics or netcode improvements for example, but I want to mention a few things I found most interesting. For example, there is now a difference between cast and rolled homogeneous armor. Right now cast armor has 5% less hardiness than RHA, but that is only temporarily until there is more data available on how much difference it actually makes. I find that interesting because it is the first step toward the different armor types and quality matter. That just makes the damage model more complex and hopefully more realistic. Not just how easy or hard it is to penetrate the armor, but also what kind of spalling or splintering effect you get from hits. Another improvement is UI related. The damage indicator that showed what damage your hits did on the target is now at the side in the form of a list, instead of the module outlines it used to be. Looks a lot better this way of course, and you get a good amount of information of what you actually damaged. Keep in mind that this is still arcade. I assume this list will not be there in more realistic modes. Well then, and of course the most interesting change to the build I showed you in my last video are new tanks. We got a lot of new tanks to play with and test, so let's take a look at a few of them. Let's start with the T-34-85. This is, I would say, so far my favorite tank in the beta. It fits my playstyle very well. I prefer medium tanks over heavies. I like the mobility they provide, combined with the good armament to flank around, change position quickly and all those things. In my personal opinion, mobility is more important than heavy armor, at least if you use your mobility correct and also if the map lets you do it. I think Cuban is a lot better for medium tanks for this reason than the Karelia map. And the T-34-85 has a very good mix of mobility, firepower and armor. The armor protection of the hull is of course still basically the same than with the old T-34-76 we had in older builds, so 45mm at the front, 60 degrees sloped back, and 40 on the side, 40 degrees sloped back. And that was pretty good on the early T-34s. But of course now with higher tier opponents it is not that impressive anymore. Most opponents you will meet now can penetrate your front, even at higher ranges most of the time. Still, it is very well sloped and if you angle a bit you can still bounce shots. But the big plus of the tank is not the armor anymore, but the combination of mobility and a good gun. The T-34-85 is of course a little heavier and slower than the older 76, but it is still pretty quick and thanks to its wide tracks very agile off-road. As armament you have, as the name suggests, a 85mm cannon, the D5T, developed from an anti-aircraft gun. This is the strongest anti-tank gun you can currently get on a Soviet tank in the beta, with the exception of the 152mm howitzer on the KV-2, which is not technically an anti-tank gun. With the 85mm you get a similar penetration than the German 75mm L48 guns get with armor piercing, but of course a lower penetration than the Tiger's 88mm. You can of course unlock more shell types, but you don't get high penetration APCR rounds like the Panzer 40. However, that does not bother me that much as I usually don't use APCR very much, for reasons I already explained in the last few videos. The gun has enough penetration to penetrate all medium tanks currently in the game frontally, out to pretty long ranges if they are not well angled. For heavies it is of course better if you manage to flank them and get the shots in their sides. Though, if you get a good hit on a weak spot like the turret ring for example, you can take out heavies even from the front. You want to avoid front-to-front shootouts with heavy tanks though, if you can of course. It is better to get one shot off, drive back into cover and show up from another position, even if it is just a little different, and hopefully get a shot into your opponent's flank. That is the kind of medium tank tactic that I currently try to perfect, though I think I still have a tendency to overstay my welcome at times. That is why I think medium tanks work very well in the hilly terrain of the Cuban map. Here you have a lot of opportunity to get into people's flanks, fire a few shots and change position. Here is my idea of how to play this map currently. If I drive a heavy tank, I try to go for the capture points, because I have the armor to hopefully take a hit or two in the exposed cap circles. You should of course clear the surrounding hills first if you can. If I drive a medium, I try to do just that. Keep the area around the cap as clear as possible, so the heavies can move in and cap them. Of course, if the opportunity arises, I also cap in mediums, but I think with their weaker armor, the mediums are less well suited for doing that with the very open cap areas on Cuban. I don't drive assault guns and tank destroyers that much, they are not really my playstyle. But their job of course would also be to keep the cap circle and its surroundings clear, but from further back more in a sniper role. But let's take a look at another tank, the German counterpart to the T-34-85 in this build and my second favorite tank at the moment, the Panzer IV H. Now I assume the reason I like this one is pretty clear. It is the other high tier medium tank currently in the beta. So again, I like the combination of mobility and firepower, plus at least some armor. The H version is most likely the most powerful Panzer IV version, and after the H there was only one more version, the J, which was more a simplification to speed up production. Compared to the F2 we had in earlier builds, the frontal armor is increased to up to 80 mm. However, only sloped back 20 degrees, which makes very little difference. Still, the frontal hull armor is now somewhat comparable to that of the T-34. The sides are now 30 mm thick compared to the F2's 20 mm plus 20 mm applique armor, still very thin. The gun is the 75 mm L48 KWK-40, a longer version of the 75 mm L42 we have on the F2, and a very good gun. The penetration with the Panzer III is at about the same level than the T-34-85 mm gets. The rate of fire in the 75 mm is a bit higher though. The damage also seems to be on a similar level, though I have to look up some more data about the two AP rounds, especially the BR-365 and the explosive filler, before I can make a proper comparison. The KWK-40 of course gets the Panzer IV APCR rounds in two different versions to unlock, and with this round the gun gets a very good penetration. I don't have it unlocked in this gameplay though, but again I prefer using the Panzer III whenever possible anyway, because of the greater damage potential of this round with its explosive filler. So overall I would say the Panzer IV H has the upper hand over the T-34-85 when it comes to the armament. The gun fires faster and the damage is at least not a lot lower than the 85 mm damage. And with the APCR and heat rounds unlocked, the gun gains a lot of versatility over the 85 mm. However, when it comes to mobility, especially in this hilly off-road terrain, the T-34 has the upper hand with its stronger engine and wider tracks. Frontal armor of the two tanks is similar on the hull. The T-34 has a slight edge, but not a lot. The turret armor is better on the T-34 though. So that's why I currently prefer the T-34, but it is a very close call and really depends on if you put more emphasis on the gun or the mobility. I don't think the T-34-85 is a better tank than the Panzer IV H. I think they have about the same value in combat, and depending on the situation or preferences of the driver, one of the two has the edge. I also think the Panzer IV is a nice preparation for the Panzer V Panther, which I hope I can play in a similar fashion. Just that the difference in front to side armor is even greater for the Panther. Well, those were two mediums. Let's take a look at the heavyweight. the Panzer VI Tiger. As I said earlier, I try to use the heavies to cap if I can on Kuban, as I think with their strong armor they are best suited for this. Still, you should try to check the surrounding high ground first, of course, and if you play with friends, it really helps to have them on the high ground covering you. Especially your flanks, of course, as being flanked is one of the biggest concerns for a heavy tank. Now, about the Tiger. The tank is of course famous for its heavy armor and its KWK-36 88mm gun. The tank has 100mm armor at the front hull, 110mm at the gun mantlet, and 80mm on the side. However, there is basically no sloping for this armor, only 20 degrees back at the driver front and no sloping at the side. That means especially from the side the tank is still somewhat vulnerable. You want to make sure you are angled in this tank, as it will help you a lot. And a lot of tanks on the higher tiers do have the penetration to get through its armor at short range. Also, if you are in a shootout, I would suggest not to sit still while you reload your gun, as it makes it easy to aim for weak spots. That goes for all tanks of course, but especially ones with relatively long reload times like the Tiger. There is no reason to sit still this long. Now on to the gun. The KWK-36 is an 88mm L56 gun and the biggest anti-tank gun currently in the beta. Again, the KV-2 howitzer is not an anti-tank gun. Now, this gun's Panzer III armor-piercing round has a very good penetration as well as a good damage potential of course, thanks to the high kinetic energy of the large round and its explosive filler. Of course, even the great penetration of this gun might not be enough if you fire badly aimed snapshots at the well-sloped armor of an angled Jagdpanzer IV, as I demonstrate here. You still have to aim properly. Now, a Panzer IV APCR round existed for this gun, though only few were made before the tungsten shortage got too severe and production had to be stopped. The Panzer IV is not yet in-game, but it is apparently in the process of being modeled and will come later. With the complex damage model that simulates both the armor and the shell quite well, introducing a new one is a not uncomplex task if you expect the round to behave correct. But once it is introduced, it will give the Tiger a shell with a monstrous penetration, again with the downside of reduced damage compared to the Panzer III of course. But even with the armor-piercing rounds, you can get some interesting results with this gun. Here, for example, I attack the A point on Karelia, and when I come around the corner I can see a KV-2 and a Tiger. I fire at the KV-2 and pull back, but since I get the kill message, I assume the KV-2 is destroyed and I move back to attack the Tiger. To my surprise, the KV-2 is not even close as destroyed as I thought it was, and is pointing its howitzer at me. Luckily, its shot only redecorates my Tiger a bit and he gets finished off by a second Tiger coming in from the other side. But I wonder of course what the kill message was from if I did not kill the KV-2. Well, as it turns out, there was an IS-1 directly behind the KV-2 and my shot went straight through the KV-2's turret ring and straight into the IS-1's engine compartment, blowing up the IS-1, which I had not even seen. So in case you wonder if you can fire through a tank and kill a second one behind it, yes you can if your penetration is high enough. I got another example of where firing right through a tank can be important later on, but for now let's take a look at the smaller tank, the medium tank Panzer III. Now this tank is currently a little difficult to consistently do well in. It is a good tank, but simply outdated compared to the opposition it faces within the current beta lineup. The Panzer III has the lowest battle rating of any of the tanks you usually have in your lineup at the moment, though you can put the Panzer II and T-26 reserve tank in your lineup, which are even lower. Still, thanks to the Panzer III's speed and good rate of fire, you can have fun matches in this tank. I like to use the speed to get into good positions early in a match, or sneak behind enemy lines and harass enemy tank destroyers. The M version is the last Panzer III version that still had an anti-tank gun. There was one version after it, the N, but the N version had the Panzer IV's short 75mm L24 gun for infantry support, as the Panzer IV took over the anti-tank role from the Panzer III. The M has a 50mm L60 gun. It has a good rate of fire, but the penetration of the armor-piercing rounds is insufficient most of the times at this level, though it can still do its job at short range or against the weaker side and rear armor. The gun does get an APCR round, which gives it pretty good penetration up to medium ranges. However, the damage is not very high. It is only a 5cm gun after all, and the actual tungsten penetrator of the Panzer 40 is of course sub-caliber and even smaller than that. The armor of the tank is not bad for its size, 50mm at the front plus 20mm applique armor at the driver's front and 30mm at the side. But its biggest plus is of course its mobility. The Panzer III is quite fast and agile. It can get around the battlefield pretty fast and change its position fast. That is especially useful on the Cuban map, which is larger and you get more opportunity to exploit that than on Corellia. If you do manage to sneak by the enemy lines and get into their backs, you can do some nice unexpected hit and run attacks with this tank. Now what's coming up next is a nice example for having too much penetration. I spot the Flak Panzer I. This vehicle has basically no armor, especially on the sides. My first shot goes into the sides and I get the driver and I miss the second shot. But the third one hits exactly the middle, however it does not seem to do much. However, when the Flak Panzer I moves, I can see a dust cloud behind it. My shot went through both sides of the Flak Panzer I and exploded after hitting the ground on the other side. So the explosive filler of my Panzer 39 does not help me at all, and the side armor of this Flak Panzer is so thin that it won't even create a whole lot of spalling or splintering to do damage either, as would happen if heavier armor is breached. All you get are two 5cm holes on both sides, and if nothing important is between the two holes, you won't do much. So here I've learned that it is a good idea to carry a few high explosive rounds, just in case. Also, I think this was a good example for a situation where the machine guns would have helped, that will be added later. Well, and this is it for this video. As always, I hope it was enjoyable, thanks for watching, and maybe I'll see you next time.